we're going to return to the Great Divorce and conclude our study in it today. And just to set the stage, so last time I talked about some of the background and sources for some of the ideas, which including one that it's a dream sequence, and that the Somnium Scipionum is a source here that I think has not been acknowledged, but an important one, because he is awoken at the end with a blinding light, much like Dante is at the end of the Paradiso. And yet there are things that are different about this, and the blinding light here is doubtless Jesus at the end of the Great Divorce, whereas in Dante it's plainly not, because he's already looking at the Trinity and he's brought back to his senses, so the light there is something different. But I wanted to cast this discussion in the framework that I've already established in the other lectures. So the entire endeavor of Lewis to try and trace the trajectory of his thought and how this fits in with that. And I think what we've already seen in the Abolition of Man, in the discarded image, is in the Abolition of Man the consequences of getting rid of the idea of higher aspects of human nature. So the reason which modern science appeals to, and still to some degree adheres to, nonetheless severing itself from other aspects of human nature, in particular our moral nature, our sense of the good and the beautiful. And that idea that Plato advances of the allegory of the chariot, in which our desires will either incline us upwards to the ideals, or they will pull us downwards towards our passions, and it's the aim of the educator to direct them upwards, directed by what is reasonable, being exemplified and to some degree categorized and pictorialized and imagined in the medieval world picture. So, and it's a hierarchical, multi-level model, and we saw that it was very strongly connected with astronomy, but it fit in with the liberal arts as well, and with the idea of hierarchy in human nature even, and hierarchy certainly amongst the beings that exist in the cosmos, God himself, but also the angels, mankind, the animals, etc. There's a chain of being, as it's sometimes called. And so there's a very hierarchical model that has verticality to it, if you will, that vertical dimensions that theologians sometimes call. But when they do so, they usually are only talking about us and God. There's a far richer understanding of that verticality in Lewis's thought, and it imbues the entire picture, including that of human nature. There's a certain hierarchy of the faculties, as well as a hierarchy amongst people, and that is very much being leveled by the modern egalitarian impulse, because it's applied very indiscriminately, and it flattens everything, as Locke says, to try and reduce everything to a tabula rasa, a blank slate. And it does enormous damage in the process. And then the consequence of that, well, Lewis talked about that in The Abolition of Man. It's that we gain power over nature, especially our own nature, but the power that we gain is gained by some at the expense of others, and by a very small number, in fact, who appeal to science, and yet it's a sort of science that ignores the objective claims of the specific features of human nature, namely our moral nature, which animals don't share. And so he's trying to reestablish this idea of the hierarchical model, and he needs to do so at the expense of the developmental model, which is implicit in Darwinism, that things have a low origin, and they ascend from that, and therefore our sense of progress is from below to above. And so he's questioning the presuppositions of evolutionary naturalism all over the place. And that includes his account of human history. Note that the account of human history that is presented in anthropology or even in history looks upon the past as a benighted age, and we are the enlightened, and we have nothing to learn from the past. And the reason we have nothing to learn from the past is because we have advanced from that original state. And that goes all the way back to its view of language. How does language come about? What are the earliest expressions of language? These sorts of theories emerge in the 18th century even, in Rousseau and a German writer by the name of Herder, Herder, on the origins, von Ursprung der Sprache. I read it a long time ago, The Origins of Language. And it's grunts and cries are the first utterances, and they're vitally emotional. So they express our feelings, but they're not logical, and logic follows that, and there's a sort of a developmental model, and that's the point here. All of these give a developmental model that is very flat. It's not hierarchical. It flattens everything down, and the distinctiveness between God, humanity, etc. are collapsed. Lewis is trying to reestablish a hierarchy between the material, which the world acknowledges now, but also the organic, which to some degree, I talked last time about this attempt in the late 19th century, a Lebensphilosophie, the idea that material nature also had a vitality about it. It wasn't just a machine. There was something there that couldn't be reduced to mere chemistry or physics, but had more to it. There was an organic aspect. Lewis wasn't satisfied with that either, because it needed to take into account the spiritual dimension, which the ancient world itself readily acknowledged as the distinctive mark of human nature, namely the fact that we have a capacity for reasoning, and moral reasoning at that as well. And so he's trying to do that as a revolt against the positivism, which was the dominant view in his day and to some degree still is. And so he's affirming a supernatural order, and the way he does so is not by just saying, I believe in God, but also by reestablishing a hierarchy there. And it then works from the top down rather than from the bottom up. And so when we come to this model here in the Great Divorce, we note, as we said last time, an attempt to recast heaven against the way it's been misconstrued in contemporary imagination as much as anything. So the idea that heaven is a projection of our low human desires, effectively. We want heaven to exist. Religion is an expression of our highest imaginative capacities. I can imagine a perfect being, etc., as Descartes says it, because he exists, therefore he can imagine that a being like himself but infinitely superior, omniscient, etc., and therefore he can establish God's existence on the basis of his own existence. Well, this is the beginning of developmentalism right there. Lewis wants to take a different tack. And so what he does, though, is he needs to deal imaginatively with the view of heaven that he's encountering in his contemporaries. Again, that heaven is basically just like the idea of human reasoning. It's not just epiphenomena. It's not just projection. It's not just a biochemical response so that we think that we are thinking. Because we could just think that we're thinking, or imagine that we're imagining, or believe that God exists. And it's what the positives just call a leap of faith. And what they mean by faith is a departure from thinking. So turn off your brains, and then you can believe. That's how they present it. Lewis needs to acknowledge that that is the central thrust of the objection, and then counter it. And how does he counter it? He counters it as a medievalist would, by talking about heaven as a more real, more substantial, more truthful, more beautiful, more good place than earth is, which is how it's portrayed in Scripture, which is how it's portrayed in the ancient world, for that matter. And so this epiphenomenology, I'll write it down again. So it's not just epi. So the phenomena is how things appear, and the epiphenomena is just an abstraction on the basis of that. So here's the appearance in the physical world, and we, on the basis of that, project upward the idea that we have reasoning. And if that's so, then we can also, and this is the insidious part of that, if that's true, then reasoning is also not reasoning at all, it's just rationalizing. So it's one group's use of reason to oppress another group, which is what we hear in our contemporary educational spheres right now. So, 2 + 2 = 4 is not true, that's white math. That sort of stuff. It's a colonialist thing, it's an oppressive thing, etc. That is the view from below. I don't mean that in a demonic sense, although maybe it is a demonic sense, because if it denies the specific characteristic of human nature, then there's something demonic about it. By the way, after the crucifixion and resurrection, God can, or Satan can no longer do anything to God. He has to go after the creature that bears the image. So in the early church, this is my take on this, the early debates regard the nature of God. He's got two natures. He's got a divine and human nature. Also the Trinity, the three persons of God, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, how they relate and so forth. The early creeds relate to that, and they're absolutely essential to what follows, which is, well, what's human nature then? Because we bear the imago Dei, we bear the image of God, and so what's God like and what are we like as a consequence? So the one is a foundation for the other, but the assaults that we're dealing with now are primarily not theological, they are anthropological. They relate to attacks on human nature. And one of the attacks is just the reductionist one, that human nature is just, it's another type of life. But it's no different than the others. So the egalitarian impulse to eradicate the human differences, which Lewis himself says never elevates the natural world, it just simply debases human nature, sticks our faces in the muck. So anyway, so he is trying to establish what heaven will be like against that imaginative expectation. And this is very important for Lewis. I think the reason that men like Lewis and Tolkien and his contemporaries are resistant to the tide of atheism of the 20th century is because they have an imaginative framework that was not forged in the modern period. They have enough of the ancient and medieval world, and they love it, and they regard sufficient truth and credibility there to be able to withstand the assaults on human nature. Not just God, but human nature. So let me get to that. Comments or questions before I proceed with that? It's just opening remarks, but okay. So the narrator here is a young writer, and he is living in hell. It appears like he hasn't been there very long. And he's disillusioned. He's disillusioned with the futility and the depression that seems to reign there. As I say, it's a sort of a slum. Let's see here. I don't know if you can read that. The overhead isn't coming down for some reason. It's a sort of a slum, and he wants more than what he experiences in hell. Which is why he decides he's going to take the bus. Can you imagine you're in an urban slum? Maybe you live in an urban slum, I don't know. There's a bus out of there. I'm taking that bus. Let's get out of here, if only for a day. And when he reaches heaven, he's very frightened by what he sees, because he senses his own fragility. And it is against the reader's expectations here, because as I say, because of Dante, but even more than because of Dante, because of the modern view of heaven as an imaginary place, which is why John Lennon can say, imagine there's no heaven, because before it's imagine there is a heaven, well, imagine there's none. And it's the same thing. It's an act of projection. Well, it's just imagine the contrary. And we're coming from the same possession, and then there'll be no war, there'll be no more pain or suffering, etc. Just imagine it so. So here he sees it otherwise, but he finds it immediately preferable to the place he came from. But the other ghosts don't do that, and that is also interesting. But in the one sense, this narrator, the poet, is the most humble of all the spirits that come then to hell. By the way, I shouldn't call them spirits, ghosts. He will encounter spirits. These are ghosts. So interesting, they're presented in the form that we would expect in the underworld of the ancient world. They're shades. They're living a shadowy existence. They exist in shadowlands, as it were. Remember that movie about C.S. Lewis called Shadowlands? We live in the shadowlands. That's not the real place. It's not where substance and joy is to be found. We have bits of joy that drive us towards heaven, but it's not really, they're not fulfilled here. But there are also clues that point that the narrator may well be Lewis himself. And among other, it's that he meets a figure by the name of George MacDonald. And George MacDonald, I submit, is something along the lines of Virgil to Lewis's Dante here. I don't think it's that difficult. I think it's pretty easy to see how that would be so, given what we know about Dante and about Virgil and about Lewis and about MacDonald. So the one's a guide to the other. There's obviously going to be differences here. There's no purgatory. MacDonald doesn't have to leave Lewis. They're both MacDonald's presented as being in heaven. And but MacDonald is going to act as a guide to Lewis, and at times, as I say, he gives him a cuff and rebukes him and so forth, and it's kind of funny. Lewis is imagining himself being rebuked by his mentor, George MacDonald. Now, MacDonald, what do you know about MacDonald? I'll just say a few words. So he's a 19th century fantasy writer, Scottish clergyman. His most famous novel is Phantastes. I showed it last time. And Lewis says that his taste for the beautiful was whetted by reading MacDonald as a child. And that's really interesting. Lewis's critique of education we've already looked at. How do you counter that? It seems that Lewis is recommending that children be exposed to beautiful and good stories very early on. And that will awaken in something in them that will help them resist the flattening effect of the world around them. It will awaken something that is dormant, it's sleeping, but it's still there, because remember, he talks about this idea of the Tao in people. People are aware of the good intuitively. They're also aware of the beautiful, and they're aware of the true, the good, the beautiful, and the true. They're aware of this in their spirit, but if they never encounter it, they can imagine that it's just subjective. It's not real. When they read about it in stories and they're more and more acquainted with it, and they see it in the people around them even more importantly, then it starts to strengthen them and allow them to be living in that world. That's what Narnia did, right? So Edmund was once moved by his passions. He was a man of the belly, right? He wanted the Turkish delight. Likewise, Uncle Andrew was just moved by his desire for money, and later for sex, because Jadis, that's a damn fine woman, right? And so you've got portraits of men who are moved by their lowest desires, and these have not been countered by moral examples. And Edmund is a terrific traitor in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and he then has to be a courageous a self-sacrificing individual. He transforms in that way, right? He goes from a man with no chest and with only passions, only his desires, to being somebody who's willing to put his life at risk, right? He's transformed by that. In the same way, we see that throughout Lewis's fiction. So characters that are given chests as a prelude to moving them up to look at the heavenly things which they only get after they leave the world of Narnia and go further up and further into the real Narnia. But it's a sort of an anticipation of heaven. So that's how you would do it. You would expose them to writers like George MacDonald or C.S. Lewis or Tolkien or whatever. Let your kids read good things. And same excuse is why we do that here at Tyndale. I'm department head, so I get to have some influence here in my own courses, obviously, but now in others, it's good. I want you to read great books. Don't want to teach you to be critical thinkers right away. When I say that, I mean literary theory. I'll subject you to that stuff in fourth year because you have to deal with it. But at first, let's awaken the desire for the good, the true, and the beautiful. And once you've got that, now we're ready to deal with the critical theories. I'm not going to give it to you in first year and all the perspectivalism and stuff that's in there. But MacDonald ends up being a mentor just like Virgil does in Dante. So this is the character. Now he meets other characters here. So who do we meet here? Well, we meet very early on in chapters 1 and certainly in 2. It's at the end of a man and a woman who have left the line. So they've got to heaven and they leave the line. They don't want to go whatever, and their pride is wounded here. And what I think Lewis is going to do here, we're not in the what's interesting there is they're in heaven, but the way they're portrayed is as if they were in hell, because for them they receive heaven as hell. And what is depicted then is types of sin within the individuals that go to heaven that they carry with them. Heaven's not the problem, they are the problem. So even though they receive a joy and a reality that's far greater than the Shadowlands they left, they are not able to enjoy it. They don't like it, they don't want it. The man and the woman who leave the line are guilty of wounded pride. If you were in Virgil's Purgatorio, that would be the first terrace. Now, they're not going to be healed of this. It's not a P on their forehead that gets erased. They just don't want to. They don't want to go anymore. Step out. I've had enough of this. Likewise, there's a short man in chapter 3. It's very, very brief, these things. I don't like it. I don't like it, screamed a voice. It gives me the pip. One of the ghosts had darted past me back into the bus. She never came out of it again, as far as I know. The others remained uncertain. "Aye, mister," said the big man, addressing the driver. "When have we got to be back?" You need never come back unless you want to," he replied. "Stay as long as you please." There was an awkward pause, because he said, "When do we have to be back? Because I can't wait to go back." "This is simply ridiculous," said a voice in my ear. One of the quieter and more respectable ghosts had sidled up to me. "There must be some mismanagement," he continued. "What's the sense of allowing all that riffraff to float about here all day? Look at them. They're not enjoying it. They'd be far happier at home. They don't even know what to do." "I don't know very well myself," said I. "What does one do?" "Oh, me? I shall be met in a moment or two. I'm expected." "I'm not bothering about that, but it's rather unpleasant on one's first day to have the whole place crowded out with trippers. Damn it, one's chief object in coming here was all to avoid them." He drifted away from me, and I began to look about. In spite of his reference to a crowd, the solitude was so vast that I could hardly notice the knot of phantoms in the foreground. So here we have somebody who is expected in heaven. They know somebody's going to come and meet me right straight, but what's with this vast crowd? I'm superior to them. Who let the rabble come along on this trip? Disgraceful. So this man is full of pride. He's self-righteous. We move on in the next chapter to a couple. So again, forms of pride here at first. So we get a man and a woman whose pride is wounded because their lusts are not being acknowledged here. A short man disapproves of Lewis. A big man is self-righteous. He's bigger than everyone else. We meet a couple. Where's the couple? If I can find it. What do we have here? Oh, this is the Episcopal ghost. Oh, I have to have this. This is good. So this is like a bishop. Oh, I guess we're going to have to. Let's deal with the bishop. My dear boy, I'm delighted to see you. It was saying to the spirit who was naked and almost blindingly white. The ghost's name is Dick. I was talking to your poor father the other day and wondering where you were. You didn't bring him, said the other. Well, no. He lives a long way from the bus, and to be quite frank, he's been getting a little eccentric lately. A little difficult. Losing his grip. He never was prepared to make any great efforts, you know. If you remember, he used to go to sleep when you and I got talking seriously. Ah, Dick, I will never forget some of our talks. I expect you've changed your views a bit since then. You became rather narrow-minded towards the end of your life, but no doubt you've broadened out again. How do you mean? Well, it's obvious by now, isn't it, that you weren't quite right. Well, why, my dear boy, you were coming to believe in a literal heaven and hell. But wasn't I right? Oh, in a spiritual sense, to be sure. I still believe in them in that way. I am still, my dear boy, looking for the kingdom, but nothing superstitious or mythological. Excuse me, where do you imagine you've been? Ah, I see. You mean that the gray town with its continual hope of morning? We must all live by hope, must we not, with its field for indefinite progress, is, in a sense, heaven, if only we have eyes to see it? That is a beautiful idea. I didn't mean that at all. Is it possible you don't know where you've been? Now that you mention it, I don't think we ever do give it a name. What do you call it? We call it hell. There's no need to be profane, my dear boy. I may not be very orthodox in your sense of that word, but I do feel that these matters ought to be discussed simply and seriously and reverently. Discuss hell reverently? I meant what I said. You have been in hell, though if you don't go back, you may call it purgatory. Go on, my dear boy, go on. That is so like you. No doubt you'll tell me why, on your view, I was sent there. I'm not angry. But don't you know, you went there because you are an apostate. Are you serious, Dick? Perfectly. This is worse than I expected. Do you really think people are penalized for their honest opinions, even assuming for the sake of argument that those opinions were mistaken? Do you think there are no sins of intellect? There are indeed, Dick. There is hidebound people. Hidebound prejudice and intellectual dishonesty and timidity and stagnation. But honest opinions fearlessly followed, they are not sins. I know we used to talk that way. I did it too until the end of my life, when I became what you call narrow. It all turns on what are honest opinions. Mine certainly were. They were not only honest, but heroic. I asserted them fearlessly. When the doctrine of the resurrection ceased to commend itself to the critical faculties which God had given me, I openly rejected it. I preached my famous sermon. I defied the whole chapter. I took every risk. What risk? What was at all likely to come of it except what actually came? Popularity, sales for your books, invitations, and finally, a bishopric. Dick, this is unworthy of you. What are you suggesting? Friend, I am not suggesting at all. You see, I know now. Let us be frank. Our opinions are not honestly come by. We simply found ourselves in contact with a certain current of ideas and plunged into it because it seemed modern and successful. At college, we just got started automatically writing the kind of essays that got good marks and saying the kind of things that won applause. When in our whole lives did we honestly face, in solitude, the one question on which all turned, whether after all the supernatural might not in fact occur? When did we put up one moment's real resistance to the loss of our faith? Note, those of you who are doing Professor Davis's class in miracles, this is that, right? It's right here. And it's the issue of the horizontal. It's not just everything flattened down, supernatural projection. This is the issue. If this is meant to be a sketch of the genesis of liberal theology in general, I reply that it is a mere libel. Do you suggest that men like, I have nothing to do with any generality, nor with any man, but you and me? Oh, as you love your own soul, remember, you know that you and I were playing with loaded dice. We didn't want the other to be true. We were afraid of crude salvationism, afraid of a breach with the spirit of the age, afraid of ridicule, afraid, above all, of real spiritual fears and hopes. I'm far from denying that young men may make mistakes. They may well be influenced by current fashions of thought, but it's not a question of how the opinions are formed. The point is that they were my honest opinions, sincerely expressed. Of course, having allowed oneself to drift, unresisting, unpraying, accepting every half-conscious solicitation from our desires, we reached a point where we no longer believed the faith. Just in the same way, a jealous man, drifting and unresisting, reaches a point at which he believes lies about his best friend. A drunkard reaches a point at which, for the moment, he actually believes that another glass will do him no harm. The beliefs are sincere in the sense that they do occur as psychological events in the man's mind. If that's what you mean by sincerity, they are sincere. And so were ours. But errors which are sincere in that sense are not innocent. You'll be justifying the Inquisition in a moment. Why? Because the Middle Ages erred in one direction. Does it follow that there is no error in the opposite direction? Wow, this is extremely interesting, said the Episcopal ghost. It's a point of view. Certainly, it's a point of view. In the meantime, there is no meantime, replied the other. All that is over. We are not playing now. I've been talking of the past, your past and mine, only in order that you may turn from it forever. One wrench, and the tooth will be out. You can begin as if nothing had ever gone wrong. White as snow. It's all true, you know. He is in me for you, with that power. And I've come a long journey to meet you. You have seen hell. You are in sight of heaven. Will you, even now, repent and believe? I'm not sure I've got the exact point you're trying to make, said the ghost. I am not trying to make any point, said the spirit. I am telling you to repent and believe. But, my dear boy, I believe already. We may not be perfectly agreed, but you have completely misjudged me if you do not realize that my religion is a very real and a very precious thing to me. Very well, said the other, as if changing his plan. Will you believe in me? In what sense? Will you come with me to the mountains? It will hurt at first until your feet are hardened. Reality is harsh to the feet of shadows. But will you come? Well, that is a plan. I am perfectly ready to consider it. Of course, I should require some assurances. I should want to guarantee that you are taking me to a place where I shall find a wider sphere of usefulness and scope for the talents that God has given me, and an atmosphere of free inquiry. In short, all that one means by civilization and the spiritual life. No, said the other. I can promise you none of these things. No sphere of usefulness. You are not needed there at all. No scope for your talents, only forgiveness for having perverted them. No atmosphere of inquiry, for I will bring you to the land not of questions, but of answers, and you shall see the face of God. But we must all interpret those beautiful words in our own way. For me, there is no such thing as a final answer. The free wind of inquiry must always continue to blow through the mind, must it not? Prove all things. To travel hopefully is better than to arrive. Quoting Robert Louis Stevenson there, traveling hopefully. If that were true, and known to be true, how could anyone travel hopefully? There would be nothing to hope for, etc. Okay, so I don't want to read the whole chapter, although actually I do want to read the whole chapter because it's really quite good. But we have here an encounter between a Christian leader who has departed from the faith. So he is guilty of apostasy, heresy, and an attempt to reform hell in a theological fashion. So he doesn't understand the difference between heaven and hell. He collapses the distinctions between the two. He denies that he was in hell, and he doesn't want to be in heaven. But he's very subtle about it. It's all about a perspective. It's a way of thinking, and he appeals to his sincerity and the atmosphere of free inquiry, which is characteristic of the university in Lewis's time. Way of dodging the issue. Lewis makes it abundantly clear to him. Very interesting in this sense. So we meet a man here, and again, it is a sort of sinner. And we will continue on with this in the next thing. Again, I'm sort of hesitant to go with this. But in chapter 6, he will continue and talk about the materialism and the economic reform of hell, which needs to take place. But let me skip over that and come to the hard-bitten ghost. I think he's probably worth, who is cynical. There he is. Chapter 7. Thinking of going back. Better if I read it in front of me. 7. Said a voice close at hand. I turned and saw a tall ghost, standing with its back against a tree, chewing a ghostly cheroot. It was that of a lean, hard-bitten man with gray hair and a gruff but not uneducated voice, the kind of man I have always instinctively felt to be reliable. I don't know, said I. Are you? Yes, it replied. I guess I've seen about all there is to see. You don't think of staying? That's all propaganda, it said. Of course there never was any question of our staying. You can't eat the fruit and you can't drink the water, and it takes all your time to walk on the grass. A human being couldn't live here. All that idea of staying is only an advertisement stunt. Then why did you come? Oh, I don't know. Just have a look around. I'm the sort of chap who likes to see things for himself. Wherever I've been, I've always had a look at anything that was being cracked up. When I was out east, I went to see Peking. What's it called? Beijing, in China. What was Peking like? Nothing to it, just one darn wall inside another. Just a trap for tourists. I've been pretty well everywhere. Niagara Falls, the Pyramids, Salt Lake City, the Taj Mahal. What was it like? Not worth looking at. They're all advertisement stunts, all run by the same people. There's a combine, a world combine that just takes an atlas and decides where they'll have a site. Doesn't matter what they choose. Anything will do as long as the publicity's properly managed. And you've lived down there in the town for some time. Is that what they call hell? Yes. It's a flop, too. They lead you to expect red fire and devils and all sorts of disinteresting or interesting people sizzling on grids, Henry VIII and all that. But when you get there, it's just like any other town. I prefer it up here, said I. Well, I don't see what all the talk is about, said the hard-bitten ghost. It's as good as any other park to look at and darned uncomfortable. Well, there seems to be some idea that if one stays here, one would get, solider, more acclimatized. I know about all that, said the ghost. Same old lie. People have been telling me that sort of thing all my life. They told me in the nursery that if I were good, I'd be happy. And then they told me at school that Latin would get easier as I went on. And after I'd been married a month, some fool was telling me that there were always difficulties at first, but with tact and patience, I'd soon settle down and like it. And all through 2 wars, what didn't they say about the good time coming if only I'd be a brave boy and go on being shot at? Of course, they'll play the old game here if anyone's fool enough to listen. The dwarfs are for the dwarfs. That's what this man, he has become cynical. I've been promised these things and I've been deluded my whole life. Constant propaganda, this is just another species of it. But who are they? They might be run by someone different. Entirely new management, eh? Don't you believe it. It's never a new management. You'll always find the same old ring. I know all about dear, kind mummy coming up to your bedroom and getting all she wants to know out of you. But you always found out she and father were the same firm, really. Didn't we find that both sides in all the wars were run by the same armament firms? Or the same firm which is behind the Jews and the Vatican and the dictators and the democracies and all the rest of it? All this stuff up here is run by the same people as the town. They're just laughing at us. Conspiracy theorist. He's a conspiracy theorist. Cynical. There's a group that runs them all. I thought they were at war. Of course you did. That's the official version. But who's ever seen any signs of it? Oh, I know that's how they talk. But if there's a real war, why don't they do anything? Don't you see that if the official version were true, those chaps up here would attack and sweep the town out of existence? They've got the strength. Okay, so we have a hard-bitten cynic here, like the dwarfs. The dwarfs are for the dwarfs. We get him for about 4 pages here. Chapter 8 moves on to that. Now, and what you're starting to get the picture of is we get a variety of sinners who have what theologians will call a besetting sin. A sin that they're guilty or capable of all sorts of sin, but there's one sin that they incline towards. Some have an intellectual sin, the theologians there. Some have the first pair that he encounters are the lovers who are insulted that their love's not being acknowledged. That's like Paolo and Francesca in Dante's Inferno, right at the top of it in Canto 5. That we meet them right away here. As we go on, we meet different types of sinners. Now, the difference is that they're in the presence of heaven, but in the presence of heaven, they experience only hell for them. And in general, they depict the sin of being of pride in general. They're being curved in upon themselves. They regard themselves. When they think of love and the love of God, they only think of it in terms of the 3 loves that they already know. Familiar love, friendship love, erotic love. And when even talking about intellectual things, it's still a projection of those things. And they don't understand the agape love of God, which is opposite to the others and is necessary to understand the 3 types of earthly loves that they experience rightly, to order them. But going on the basis of human experience, they conclude that God is like us, and that heaven is as we might imagine it to be. Whereas Lewis is going to present it as entirely incompatible for earthly spirits. We don't understand it, we can't live in it, it's too good for us to even cope with. He will move on. Chapter 8, we have a well-dressed ghost. This well-dressed ghost is full of shame. Very self-centered. I'll read it a little bit. I sat still on a stone by the riverside, feeling as miserable as I ever felt in my life. Hitherto it had not occurred to me to doubt the intentions of the solid people. Note that the effect of the cynic is to make him cynical. He hangs around people who are cynical about everything, endlessly cynical. These people sound correct because they sound like they have earthly wisdom. They're very bitter about everything. If you're around bitter people all the time, you will be embittered. And he becomes, as a consequence, miserable. Hitherto it had not occurred to me to doubt the intentions of the solid people, nor to question the essential goodness of their country, even if it were a country which I could not long inhabit. It had indeed once crossed my mind that if these solid people were as benevolent as I'd heard one or two of them claim to be, they might have done something to help the inhabitants of the town, something more than meeting them on the plain. Now a terrible explanation came into my mind. How if this whole trip were allowed the ghosts merely to mock them? Horrible myths and doctrines stirred in my memory. I thought about how the gods had punished Tantalus in the underworld, the pagan account. I thought of the place in the book of Revelation where it says the smoke of hell goes up forever in the sight of the blessed spirits. I remember how poor Cooper, William Cooper, the English poet, 18th century poet, dreaming that he was not after all doomed to perdition, at once knew the dream to be false and said, these are the sharpest arrows in his quiver. Cooper's a great poet and a great hymn writer, by the way, suffered terrible depression in life. He is a Christian. And what the hard-bitten ghost had said about the rain was nearly true. Even a shower of dewdrops from a branch might tear me in pieces. I'd not thought of this before, and how easily I might have ventured into the spray of the waterfall. So now he senses danger very strongly. And as he stops, he realizes he's not alone. Let me go here. A ghost hobbled across the clearing as quickly as it could on that uneasy soil, looking over its shoulder as if it were pursued. I saw that it had been a woman, a well-dressed woman, I thought, but its shadows of finery looking ghastly in the morning light. It was making for the bushes. It could not really get in among them. The twigs and leaves were too hard, but it pressed as close up against them as it could. It seemed to believe it was hiding. A moment later, I heard the sound of feet, and one of the bright people came in sight. One always noticed that sound there, for we ghosts made no noise when we walked. "Go away," squealed the ghost. "Go away. Can't you see I want to be alone?" "But you need help," said the solid one. "If you have the least trace of decent feeling left," said the ghost, "you'll keep away. I don't want help. I want to be left alone. Do go away. You know I can't walk fast enough on those horrible spikes to get away from you. It's abominable of you to take advantage." "Oh, that," said the spirit. "That'll soon come right, but you're going in the wrong direction. It's back there to the mountains you need to go." Note that the mountains are a bit like the in Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It's the end of the world, and there's a high cliff, the mountains. "You can lean on me all the way. I can't absolutely carry you, but you need have almost no weight on your own feet, and it will hurt less at every step. I'm not afraid of being hurt. You know that. Then what is the matter? Can't you understand anything? Do you really suppose I'm going out there among all those people like this? But why not? I'd never have come at all if I'd known you were all going to be dressed like that. Friend, you see, I'm not dressed at all. I didn't mean that. Do go away. But can't you even tell me? If you can't understand, there'd be no good trying to explain it. How can I go out like this among a lot of people with real, solid bodies? It's far worse than going out with nothing on would have been on earth. Have everyone staring through me. Oh, I see. But we were all a bit ghostly when we first arrived, you know. That'll wear off. Just come out and try. But they'll see me. What does it matter if they do? I'd rather die. But you've died already. There's no good trying to go back to that. The ghost made it sound something between a sob and a snarl. I wish I'd never been born, it said. What are we born for? For infinite happiness, said the spirit. You can step out into it at any moment. But I tell you, they'll see me. An hour hence, and you will not care. A day hence, and you will laugh at it. Don't you remember, on earth, there were things too hot to touch with your finger, but you could drink them all right? Shame is like that. If you will accept it, if you will drink the cup to the bottom, you will find it very nourishing. But try to do anything else with it, and it scalds. What's he talking about here when talking about shame and the pain of it? It's in a way a picture, the same sort of thing that Eustace undergoes when Aslan tears his skin off with the claws. It goes very deep. How deep does it need to go? They need to be born again. That's how deep. And she's not willing to do that because she has a sense of concealed pride. She feels ashamed, but she feels ashamed because her pride still governs her thinking and her actions. And she would move there if there could be some concessions there, if there were a middle ground, if she could just build up to it. And the interesting thing is that the spirit suggests exactly that's what will happen. If you take a step towards it, it will become less shameful with each step. But first of all, you have to accept that there is nothing in you of which you deserve to be proud. So at the center of this is the theology of the cross that I talked about before. And the idea of God's grace not being like the other loves. You have to understand the categoric distinction there, and it underlies all of these encounters, but particular, obviously, here, because now it's in terms of heat. But you have to drink the cup to the bottom. You have to accept that there's nothing worthy in you. And then you will be ready. So 2 doctrines here. One is that of justification. And then the stepping forward is the sanctification. So it gets easier. It's at first as hard as it, well, how hard is it? Well, you have to die to yourself. That's how hard it is. And once you've done that, then the process of sanctification that comes with it in the sight of heaven is also going to be difficult, but gets easier as you go because you build up strength and you're casting off the old you. Like Martin Luther says that the Christian life is one of daily, lifelong repentance. That's what's going on here, I think. Try to do anything else with it, and it scalds. You really mean, said the ghost. And note that the ghost here is just like the Episcopal ghost, seems to not understand the perspective. Simply can't accept it. It's not that they can't understand it, it's cognitively entirely clear and straightforward. I just have to do this. But there's a reluctance, and the reluctance is motivated by love, and a disordered love, and above all, a love of themselves and a love of their loves. They lust after something, and they don't want to let that go. And that's the thing that keeps them from the very thing which is the fruition, the fulfillment of all their loves. That's the irony here. You really mean, said the ghost, and then paused. My suspense was strained up to the height. I felt that my own destiny hung on her reply. I could have fallen at her feet and begged her to yield. Yes, said the spirit, come and try. Because remember, Lewis, or the poet, is observing the encounter between the ghost and the spirit. Come and try. Almost. I thought the ghost had obeyed. Certainly it had moved. But suddenly it cried out, no, I can't. I tell you, I can't. For a moment while you were talking, I almost thought, but when it comes to the point, you've no right to ask me to do a thing like that. It's disgusting. I should never forgive myself if I did. Never, never. And it's not fair. You ought to have warned us. I'd never have come. And now, please, please go away. Friend, said the spirit, could you only for a moment fix your mind on something not yourself? The idea of repentance is turning away from. It's to turn around. She can't, she's in the midst, so the irony here is she has heaven in front of her. She can see it. But even in the midst of heaven, she can see heaven, she can only see herself. Because that's all she ever sees, projections of herself. Now the irony is this is how heaven is presented by its critics, is that heaven is a projection of our desires. When in reality, it's the other way around. The earth is a projection of our desires, and we think that they're good, even when they're manifestly not good. And they result in our misery. We still hold on to them, and what's that thing in us that causes us to do so? It's sin. We love ourselves. Could you, only for a moment, fix your mind on something not yourself? I've already given you my answer, said the ghost, coldly, but still tearful. Then only one expedient remains, said the spirit, and to my great surprise, he set a horn to his lips and blew. I put my hands over my ears. The earth seemed to shake. The whole wood trembled and dindled at the sound. I suppose there must have been a pause after that, though there seemed to be none, before I heard the thudding of hoofs, far off at first, but already nearer before I had well identified it, and soon so near that I began to look about for some place of safety. Before I had found one, the danger was all about us. A herd of unicorns came thundering through the glades, 27 hands high, the smallest of them, and white as swans, but for the red gleam in eyes and nostrils and the flashing indigo of their horns. I can still remember the squelching noise of the soft, wet turf under their hoofs, the breaking of the undergrowth, the snorting and the whinnyings, how their hind legs went up and their horned heads down in mimic battle. Even then I wondered for what real battle it might be the rehearsal. I heard the ghost scream, and I think it made a bolt away from the bushes, perhaps toward the spirit, but I don't know, for my own nerve failed, and I fled, not heeding for the moment the horrible going underfoot, and not once daring to pause, so I never saw the end of that interview. Fascinating. As I say, we're seeing a common feature of the ghosts as they go to heaven now, which is that they don't want the thing that they say that they want. They want the thing that they say they don't want. They contradict themselves, and they are motivated not by their reasoning, but rather by their sin, rather their disordered loves, the loves that are not fulfilled in God, but rather fulfilled in themselves. And there are various forms of that love. And Lewis will expand on these in, as I say, the four loves. But this spirit, that of a woman, is self-centered, ashamed. One We'll meet all sorts of different spirits now. How shall we present them? I've got a bit of time. So, chapter 9, we have a complaining spirit right at the outset. And Lewis gives a Scottish accent. Oops. "Where are you going?" said a voice with a strong Scotch accent. Sorry, that was awful. I stopped and looked. The sound of the unicorns had long since died away, and my flight had brought me to the open country. I saw the mountains where the unchanging sunrise lay, and in the foreground 2 or 3 pines on a little knoll with some large smooth rocks and heather. On one of the rocks sat a very tall man, almost a giant, with a flowing beard. I had not yet looked one of the solid people in the face. Now, when I did so, I discovered that one sees them with a kind of double vision. Here was an enthroned and shining God, whose ageless spirit weighed upon mine like a burden of solid gold. And yet, at the very same moment, here was an old weather-beaten man, one who might have been a shepherd. Such a man as tourists think simple because he's honest, and neighbors think deep for the same reason. His eyes had the far-seeing look of one who had lived long in open, solitary places, and somehow I divined the network of wrinkles which must have surrounded them before rebirth had washed him in immortality. I don't quite know, said I. Ye can sit down and talk to me then, he said, making room for me on the stone. I don't know you, sir, said I, taking my seat beside him. I'm not going to continue with this caution. My name is George, he answered. George MacDonald. Oh, I cried. Then you can tell me. You at least will not deceive me. Then, supposing that these expressions of confidence needed some explanation, I tried, trembling to tell this man all that his writings had done for me. I tried to tell him how a certain frosty afternoon at Leatherhead Station, when I first bought a copy of Fantastes, being then about 16 years old, had been to me what the first sight of Beatrice had been to Dante. Here begins the new life. I started to confess how long that life had delayed in the region of imagination merely, how slowly and reluctantly I had come to admit that his Christendom had more than an accidental connection with it. How hard I had tried not to see that the true name of the quality which one first met in his books is holiness. Where was that? I'll go with this for a second. He laid his hand first on mine and stopped me. Son, he said, your love, all love, is of an inexpressible value to me, but it may save precious time. Here he suddenly looked very Scotch. If I inform ye that I am already well acquainted with these biographical details. In fact, I've noticed that your memory misleads you in 1 or 2 particulars. Oh, said I, and became still. Ye had started, said my teacher, to talk of something more profitable. Sorry, terrible, I'm thinking, it is awful. Sir, said I had almost forgotten it, and I have no anxiety about the answer now, though I have still a curiosity. It is about these ghosts. Do any of them stay? Can they stay? Is any real choice offered to them? How do they come to be here? Have ye never heard of the refrigerium? I talked about this, the idea of a holiday. A man with your advantages might have read it in Prudentius, not to mention Jeremy Taylor. The name is familiar, sir, but I'm afraid I've forgotten what it means. It means the damned have holidays, excursions, you understand. Excursions to this country, for those that will take them. Of course, most of the silly creatures don't. They prefer taking trips back to earth. They go and play tricks on the poor daft women ye call mediums. They go and try to assert their ownership of some house that once belonged to them. And then You get what's called a haunting. Or they go to spy on their children. Or literary ghosts hang about public libraries to see if anyone's still reading their books. But what if they come here? They can really stay. Aye, you'll have heard that the Emperor Trajan dead. But I don't understand. Is judgment not final? Is there really a way out of hell into heaven? It depends on the way you're using the words. If ye leave that grey town behind it, and it will not have been hell. To any that leaves it, it is purgatory. And perhaps ye had better not call this country heaven. Not deep heaven, ye understand. Here he smiled at me. Ye can call it the valley of the shadow of life. And yet to those who stay here, it will have been heaven from the first. And ye can call those sad streets in the town yonder the valley of the shadow of death. But to those who remain there, they will have been hell even from the beginning. I suppose he saw that I looked puzzled, for presently he spoke again. So let me stop here for a minute. So now he's not asserting that heaven and hell are not places. He asserts very clearly that they are. That was to the Episcopal Ghost. He is, however, saying that love has a horizontal direction and also a vertical direction. It moves either up or it moves down. And when you think you're moving sideways with it, you're down. It must be elevated because love is marked by God. It's characterized by it. So it must, for love to be love, it must point upwards. It must take you upwards. And if you do, you will regard the place where you were, namely the earth, as a purgatory where your sins were purged. So he's taking Dante's vision, he's getting rid of purgatory, or rather he's putting purgatory as an earthly phenomenon, and it's for those who live the earthly life, anticipating heaven's joys. But for those who denied that, having been in the presence of heaven, that there was anything real there, then they'll go back to earth and it will be what they always took it to be. And it will be nothing but that, but hell. So they will be in the place they want to be. So it's not that God shuts the door on those who want into heaven. He offers them heaven and they don't want to be there. They're not pounding on the door, let me in, you meanie. I want to be in. I want to be in heaven. Why won't you let me in? They're already shown heaven. And they don't want to be there. Therefore, they have the place they're happy with, which is hell. And then they find that their desires for which are debased become more and more debased. And they may hate that more and more, but not enough to repent of it. Son, ye cannot look in your present state, understand eternity. When Anodos looked through the door of the timeless, he brought no message back. But ye can get some likeness of it if ye say that both good and evil, when they are fully grown, become retrospective. This is the thing, the fruit of sin is death, right? When it's fully grown. It talks about that at the beginning of the book of James, James 1:16, thereabouts. Sin gave rise to eventual death, and same hope is fulfilled. Now, not only this valley, but all their earthly past will have been heaven to those who are saved. Not only the twilight in that town, but all their life on earth too will then be seen by the damned to have been hell. This is what mortals misunderstand. They say of some temporal suffering, No future bliss can make up for it, not knowing that heaven, once attained, will work backwards and turn even that agony into a glory. And this is the theology of the cross. The agony of God, the dereliction of the cross, is turned into glory in 3 days. Right? In the world, we talked about the theology of the cross last time, the sense of shame, of judgment, of humiliation, of dereliction, of abandonment, of sin, of cursing, is actually the means by which God brings about his justification, his glorification, etc. And first for Christ, and then for those who have faith in him. So that it works backwards. It takes your entire life, even before you placed your faith in Christ, and transforms your whole past. You look at your past and saw that God was at work even before you came to faith in him, and it there goes forward. So it's not future bliss making up for it, it's undoing what's been done. As it says here, George MacDonald, will work backwards and turn even that agony into a glory. And of some sinful pleasure they say, let me have but this, and I'll take the consequences, little dreaming how damnation will spread back and back into their past and contaminate the pleasure of the sin. Both processes begin even before death. So what we call space-time, we think things can't go backwards. It does go backwards. So the sin that you commit in the present actually changes your past even, not just your future. And likewise, your decision to face heaven reinterprets your past. To put it in the terms of that essay, which I said was so important, transposition, it transposes the music of your life into another key. Not just going forward, but even backwards. It helps you see what you before could not see. But MacDonald, both processes begin even before death. The good man's past begins to change so that his forgiven sins and remembered sorrows take on the quality of heaven. The bad man's past already conforms to his badness and is filled only with dreariness. And that is why at the end of all things, when the sun rises and the twilight turns to blackness down there, the blessed will say, we have never lived anywhere except in heaven. And the lost, we were always in hell. And both will speak truly. Is that not very hard, sir? I mean, that is the real sense of what they will say. In the actual language of the lost, the words will be different, no doubt. One will say he's always served his country, right or wrong, and another that he has sacrificed everything to his art, and some that they've never been taken in, and in some that, thank God, they've always looked after number one, and nearly all that at least they've been true to themselves. And the saved? The saved. What happens to them is best described as the opposite of a mirage. So again, now, the projection. Again, from the perspective of the developmental view, heaven is a projection upward. It's a mirage. It's a pleasing fiction. It's best described as the opposite of a mirage. What seemed when they entered it to be the veil of misery turns out when they look back to have been a well. And where present experience saw only salt deserts, memory truthfully records that the pools were full of water. Then those people are right who say that heaven and hell are only states of mind. Hush, he said sternly, do not blaspheme. Hell is a state of mind. Ye never said a truer word. And every state of mind, left to itself, every shutting up the creature within the dungeon of its own mind, is in the end hell. But heaven is not a state of mind. Heaven is reality itself. All that is fully real is heavenly. For all that can be shaken will be shaken, and only the unshakable remains. Interpretation of Hebrews chapter 12. You've come to Mount Zion, the city of the living God. Tremors, the people are terrified at the sight. All that can be shaken will be shaken. What will be shaken is the dungeons of your own mind. They might be shaken, but the reality of God and his heaven will not be shaken. The rest will be burnt away. It will be removed like dross in the fire. But is there a real choice after death? My Roman Catholic friends would be surprised, for to them souls in purgatory are already saved, and my Protestant friends would like it no better, for they'd say that the tree lies as it falls. They're both right, maybe. Do not fash yourself with such questions. Fash yourself, Scottish. Don't fuss. Don't fash yourself with such questions. You cannot fully understand the relations of choice and time till you are beyond both. And ye were not brought here to study such curiosities. What concerns you is the nature of the choice itself, and that ye can watch them making. Well, sir, I said, that also needs explaining. What do they choose, these souls who go back? I've seen no others. And how can they choose it? Milton was right, said my teacher. The choice was of every soul can be expressed in the words, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. There's always something they insist on keeping, even at the price of misery. There's always something they prefer to joy, that is, to reality. You see it easily enough in a spoiled child that would rather miss its play and its supper than say it was sorry and be friends. Ye call it the sulks, but in adult life it has 100 fine names. Achilles' wrath and Coriolanus' grandeur, revenge and injured merit and self-respect and tragic greatness and proper pride. But there's the point. I finished with MacDonald. We could go on to the other. There's a tragedian named Frank and Sarah Smith and so forth that comes later, a mother exhibiting love and self-pity and possessive love. All these are varieties there. But MacDonald explains the way in which heaven works and hell opposite to it. I think it's the best explanation of this here. And again, I said last time, he ends up awaking out of a dream, being at the cloak of his master, he thinks, and experiencing the light as a solid thing falling upon him, and realize that he's sort of fallen and grabbed the tablecloth and the lamp crashes on top of him, but he wakes up out of a dream, the dream sequence. But the dream is of a reality which is the heavenly reality, just like the dream of Scipio and just like Dante. So same sort of thing, but now note that it is directly answering the concerns and questions and doubts of his contemporaries. We'll pick it up next time. I have